Trump administration doubled down on their assault on American health care by supporting an effort to completely eliminate the health care law through the courts. People scratch their head. Are they really doing this? After trying for 2 years unsuccessfully, after losing the election? Yep, they were. The action is no small matter. The Trump administration's radical support for the wholesale elimination of the health care law would send our health care system into certain chaos. If the Trump administration has its way, it would send premiums soaring for millions of Americans. It would revoke coverage for tens of millions more who gain coverage through medical expansions. It would strike protections for an estimated 133 million adults in America who have pre-existing medical conditions, even people who get coverage from their employer. Let me say that again. There are 133 million Americans who have pre-existing medical conditions. If the Trump administration has its way, the insurance company could just tell those 133 million and their families, cut you off. We don't want to pay for your insurance anymore because it's too expensive. Your daughter has cancer. Your wife has severe diabetes. It's a disgrace. And let's not forget, the system would impose billions of dollars in new prescription drug costs on seniors in Medicare. The consequences are dire, and that's why we are introducing an amendment to ensure that not a dime of the American people's money goes to the Trump administration's fight to destroy the entire healthcare system. Not 1 cent to the Department of Justice should be used to hurt Americans like this. You know, Donald Trump campaigned on end Obamacare, and then the Republican Party, and even we thought Trump himself, saw they had no replacement. This repeal and replace, there was no replacement. They couldn't come up with one. And so what is now the Republican Party standing for? Well, here it is. The Republican Party will become the party of health care, says Donald Trump? Absolutely not. Here's what his tweet should say if he's being honest and telling the truth to the American people. The Republican Party will become the party that ended your health care. You cannot have a situation where the Trump administration, President Trump says one thing and their Attorney General goes to court to do the opposite. You cannot or should not have a situation where our Republican senators get up and say we need to expand health care for people, and then they'd say not a peep when their own president tries to strip it away from them. President Trump says the Republican Party wants to be the party of health care. Well, I say, God help the middle class if Republicans are the party of health care. What, dare I ask, is their plan? Let me ask Leader McConnell and every Republican senator, and I hope their constituents will ask them too, because this is the #1 issue across the country. We should ask our Republican friends and the president, what's your plan to deal with prescription drug costs? Costs are at an all-time high. But instead, they're supporting this lawsuit, which would impose billions of dollars in prescription drug costs on seniors. We asked President Trump and Leader McConnell, what's your plan to get more people covered on high-quality health insurance that they can actually afford at a time when premiums are still rising because of sabotage by the Trump administration? How will they bring relief? But instead, our Republican colleagues, by their silence, are assenting to a lawsuit that would kick tens of millions of people off insurance. I ask President Trump, Senator McConnell, and our Republican colleagues, what's your plan to protect people with pre-existing conditions? Republicans say over and over again that they support keeping safeguards for pre-existing conditions. But instead, they're supporting this lawsuit, or by their silence, assenting to their president's, their party's president's lawsuit completely wipes the protections for pre-existing conditions away. The American people deserve answers because President Trump insisted yesterday that he has a, quote, a plan that is far better than Obamacare. We all know that's not true. He just talks off the top of his head. He said it at the lunch. Well, President Trump, what is your plan that's better than Obamacare? You may not have all the details, but give us the main points. When you're president, you have a responsibility as people's lives are at stake. They need health care, to not simply say we have a better plan, file a lawsuit which gets rid of the existing plans, and give people no inclination, no even clue as to what that plan is. Now, why is this? Why is this happening? Well, one, we know that President Trump has no fidelity to issues. He talks off the top of his head. He doesn't know what the issues are all about. He's the least informed president we've ever had in American history about issues. He just says what he thinks sounds nice at the moment. But then his administration does the hard right thing all the time, the extreme thing that's in the narrow special interest, but not in the American people's. President Trump's actual administration seems to be far to the right even of the mainstream of the Republican Party. Why does that happen? Well, here's one reason. As reported last night, Mick Mulvaney, who is now the chief of staff, was OMB head and still sort of has a lot of say over that agency. It was reported last night it was Mick Mulvaney, against the advice of others, who convinced President Trump to take this radical position on health care. So we all know who's holding the strings, who's putting in President Trump's head, these hard right ideas which his administration continually effectuates and almost never backs off from. We now seem to be living in the Mick Mulvaney administration. The same person who said we need to end Medicare as we know it, that, Mr. President, should change to chill down every American spine. Let me repeat that again. The Mick Mulvaney administration, which President Trump is a willing follower, if you will, says we should end Medicare as we know it. Do Americans believe that? Nope. Do Republicans believe that? Not most of them. But this man Mulvaney, not elected, puts ideas in President Trump's head, and that's what President Trump does. So make no mistake about it. The ultimate responsibility is President Trump's. But when you wonder why the words the president says so differ from so many administration policies, and it's the policies that are hurting Americans, the reason is Mulvaney. So here's what the Mulvaney administration looks like. Extreme budget cuts to the programs that the middle-class families depend on. Cuts to the Department of Education, Transportation and Science, severe cuts. Severe cuts to EPA. Cuts to programs that are most in need, SNAP. Cutting Medicare faster. And repeated government shutdowns. Yesterday it was reported the administration is considering no more Fannie and Freddie, no more help for the middle class to buy a home. Another great Mulvaney idea. Mick Mulvaney was one of the 5 most hard-right people in the House of Representatives, one of the authors of the previous shutdown. His views are far, far away from the average American. And Donald Trump, who gets full blame for Mulvaney's ideas because he's enacting them, seems to be following him lock, stock, and barrel. If the president actually campaigned in 2016 on these Mulvaney ideas, he would have been roundly defeated. If he goes back, when he goes to Michigan tonight, and if he talked about these Mulvaney ideas, he'd get booed even by his own supporters. But he enacts the Mulvaney ideas. His Justice Department is now suing to get rid of health care, something Mulvaney has always advocated for. President Trump, your administration is now the Mulvaney administration, and that should terrify every single American. It should terrify any thoughtful Republican senator. Make no mistake about it. Donald Trump's hard right administration, which so hurts the middle class and so helps the narrow, wealthy, special, and corporate interests, the brainchild of many of these ideas comes from Mr. Mulvaney. He puts it into the cipher of Donald Trump. Donald Trump enacts it, and the American people suffer.
On Capitol Hill next week, the House will consider reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which expired in February. It's aimed at preventing all types of abuse and providing resources